when I was a Muslim, I used to actually have a little bit of a problem with evolution.
One of the comments that came through on our last video, one guy started calling us collectively monkeys, because presumably we live in, we believe in evolution, and yeah, monkeys should stick to their own kind and go and be Darwinists, as if, because I'm not religious, therefore I'm in another group. But I'm not in any group.
But that's it. I mean, humans want to keep on sort of putting people in pigeonholes, don't they?
Yeah.
And it's just ridiculous. I mean, YouTube is crazy though, isn't it? I mean, the comments you get. I find a lot of the comments are just ad hominem. They're just attacking your character.
Yeah. Or I mean, I'd rather that than a group that you're not even part of. At least have a go at me, and not scientists as a whole, who are all something. But yeah, at least play.
It makes it easier for them to deal with, you see, so they can dismiss you.
Yeah. Well,
they straw man you so that they can dismiss you.
Yeah. If only they'd play the man and not the ball.
That's very rare, unfortunately. That's very rare, and that's something I would love to do. I'd love to have just a nice, friendly discussion where you just honestly talk about your real feelings, and you can open up yourself. Because a lot of the time you don't want to open up yourself because you know that person is just waiting to stick the knife in.
And attack you personally.
You know, so yeah, exactly. So you try to just, just not say anything too sort of controversial, but it'd be nice to have just an honest conversation where you can trust that the person is just going to be sincere with you.
Not going to do my idea, come down in a burqa.
You never know. One day, you've got to take a closer look at some of the niqabas around here. You might find it's me.
Yeah, I will. From now on, I'll be wondering. We were saying earlier on about people believing what they want to be true. Let's hold up the mirror now. Do we, as non-religious people, desperately want it not to be true? Because if it is true, we're you know what will happen to us.
Well, I think there's no doubt that there is an element of that. I mean, for a long time I wanted Islam to be true, and I really tried to find a way to find a place in Islam for myself.
Why did you want it to be true?
I wanted it to be true because I like the idea that there is a God up there who cares for me, who loves me, and that there's a greater meaning to life, that there is a purpose, and that there is a place beyond the chaos of this world, where everything is perfect and people can just be nice and love each other and be happy, and all problems are gone, and that justice, all the people that hurt people are, somehow get their justice, and those who have suffered get their justice. It's a very attractive idea, and I really wanted that to be true. And when I was little, I mean, ever since as far back as I can remember, my mum and dad told me that there was a God who loves me, and that he cares about me, and that he was merciful and loving and kind. And
they emphasise the positive more than the negative.
And I, if you like, I've kind of had a constant conversation with that God that I was taught, when I was very, very young, and I've always loved that God. It's a lovely idea, and I would still like it to be true.
Okay. Do you have any hope that it might be?
I really don't know. I mean, people often say, "Do you believe in God?" And sometimes I think I do believe in something, some sort of greater force, some sort of greater power. But I don't believe in the descriptions that are found in religious texts. I just find them very human, and not even, a sort of an evolved human, a human from a couple of thousand years ago. Ideas of eternal hell, as you know, is one of my things that I find utterly, contradictory to the idea of God that I was taught. For example, this idea of a great, wonderful, amazing God that is so high above everything, that he would torture people forever, creatures that he created, that he knew were going to turn out like this, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. But I still hold on to the idea that there is something. Sometimes I do ask myself, is it just that I want it to be true? And of course, just because you want something to be true doesn't mean it is true. So sometimes I doubt that there is anything. Honestly, I just don't know. That's why I just say I'm agnostic. I really don't know.
How long ago were you religious?
It's been... I think I openly said I don't believe in Islam in 2007, so that's what, 12, 13 years.
And presumably it was a gradual decline, though, to the point at which you had to say something.
It was. I would say that over about 10 years, I started having doubts and questions, and I kept on putting them in a box that God will explain later, or I tried to use a lot of sort of more progressive apologetics to explain them. I was still absolutely sure that Islam was the truth, but I kept saying, well, look, with my limited mind, I can't understand these things. God can explain them, and I'm sure God will, have a good explanation for it. And it's just my inadequacy,
What would the you of 20 years ago or 30 years ago have thought about a person such as yourself now?
I think he would be horrified.
Would he advise you, oh, you're going to hell if you carry on like this?
He probably would.
Okay.
He probably would. And I always used to say back in those days that nobody really genuinely leaves Islam, and I used to I used to be like a lot of the people who attack me, who say that, oh, you couldn't have been a real Muslim.
Okay.
I would have said exactly the same thing. I would have said there's no way that you could have been really a true Muslim, and you couldn't have tasted the sweetness of Islam and the sweetness of faith.
Really?
To leave it.
This is almost like the annulment in the Catholic Church. You can never get divorced, but if they can prove that the marriage was never genuine, then you can annul it. A true Muslim would never leave Islam. Okay. So, presumably, just as you had faith back then that Islam was true, now, in a way, you're putting your faith, putting your eggs all in one basket that it's not true. Because if it is,
well, the thing is that
the worst possible scenario will unfold.
But the thing is, I did try for a really long time to make, for me to believe in it, and I wanted it to be true, and I tried to find ways to get around the difficult problems that I had. But in the end, I had to be honest with myself, and that was the thing. It's not because I don't want Islam to be true. I simply had to be honest that I can't believe some of these things. I can't believe that.
What are the biggest problems, moralistic or scientific?
No, it was more moralistic. It was more things like hell. It was more things like the verse about that you can hit a wife. It was things like things didn't make sense in the Quran, like some of the stories, just didn't make sense about the Gog and Magog being trapped behind a wall for 2,000 years.
But all these things could have allegorical meaning, right?
Well,
people talk about mutashabihat. Is that when the verses are allegorical?
Yeah, the thing is that I look at it this way. God knows, if he exists, he knows everything in my heart, and he knows what I'm thinking. And he knows that I've got doubts about these things. And he knows that I'm genuinely trying to understand them and tried to make sense of them. If I'm wrong, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But I'm not insincere. I'm not lying. I'm not pretending. I genuinely can't believe some of these things. So if there is a God, I'm happy for him to judge me.
Okay. I think with anything like the Bible or the Quran, if you take it as a literal document, you'll either end up as an extremist or you'll reject it. But if you take it as a spiritual, analogous, metaphorical guide, an inspiration, then you could live a middle way and be spiritual and live in the real world.
And I think a lot of Muslims are now sort of moving to that sort of metaphorical, allegorical, more progressive kind of faith. I think it's quite hard for those who are a very literalist to maintain their faith, and I think a lot of them are, sort of making their faith very brittle, because it's quite easy to to sort of find the faults in a very literalistic view. But I do think that a lot of more progressive, more metaphorical Muslims can find a way to do that. But when I tried to do that, it felt dishonest. Okay. I mean, I tried to find, for example, explanations for the verse about hitting a wife, that وَضْرِبُوهُنَّ doesn't mean hit them, it means leave them alone or something like that. But I know Arabic, and I know it doesn't mean that, and so I couldn't pretend that it means that, because I felt dishonest.
Okay. But there are people that interpret that verse, just to go into it briefly, as something else, and darab can mean strike, as in strike up a poem, and it could mean yell at them.
That's right, strike up a similitude
or whatever.
وَضْرِبْ مَثَلًا and وَضْرِبْ عَنْهُمْ, leave them alone.
Okay.
But from a linguistic point of view, I think most people who know Arabic know that really this is a very weak explanation. وَضْرِبُوهُنَّ really does mean hit them.
But language does change, doesn't it? And language means what people interpret it to mean at the time. And we talk about the rules of grammar. I've heard people try and pick on the Quran and say, oh, there's grammatical errors. But in modern standard Arabic that we have now, the grammar comes from the Quran.
Yes.
And is based on the Quran.
Yeah, indeed.
So it's about how people have applied the language.
And I never ever go down that road of criticising the grammar, because it's futile.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, as you say, the Quran is based. Arabic grammar is based on the Quran. Yeah. So, whatever anomalies may or may not have been there, they are written into the Arabic grammar. So, no, for me, it's always been more of a moral or philosophical problem.
Yeah. I mean, in the times that the Quran was written, I think it was just taken for granted that people did beat their wives.
Yeah.
And people probably came with the question, and what type of beating do we give our wife?
I mean, to be fair, the Quran in its context was probably an advancement of that particular society. Yeah. It was saying, look, you don't resort to hitting your wife. First you talk to her. First and then if that doesn't solve the problem, you separate from bed. And then only as a last resort, and then you should follow the Prophet's example where he didn't hit his wife. So really, in many ways, you could say that it's amounts to a virtual ban, and that's what I used to say for some time. But it still felt a little bit disingenuous.
All these values from 1,000 years ago plus, it's about what direction you're going in, and I suppose in an era when domestic violence is rife, this advice, it's a step in the right direction. 1,000 years later, it looks barbaric, but that's because we've carried on in the good direction. The same with slavery.
But this is the problem, you see. If I was to judge Islam and Muhammad by its context, I think we could be quite generous. We could judge Islam quite generously. But the problem is that Islam claims to be more than that. It claims to be for all times and all places, and because of that, we've got no choice but to judge it a little more harshly.
Yeah, for all times is a bold claim.
It is indeed.
Sure. That is for sure. Well, I might go and take these questions around the park. Shall I let you address them? I don't know what you're going to say.
I'm just relaxing. I'm just chilling.
You chill, but I want to get your take on what was.
Oh, you were sent a question, weren't you?
So this is from Abdullah A, an ex-Muslim. Could you please forward my question to any of the speakers like Shamsi, Mansour, etc., etc.? How can Adam be the first human, even though human-like creatures like Cro-Magnon, Homo neanderthalis, and Homo something else, and Homo erectus? It's the evolution question. Yes. Basically, he's gone quite particular. They existed before Adam. You cannot say this particular fact is a theory, as we clearly see the existence of these human-like fossils. Okay, long story short, evolution disproves religion. Is that one of the factors that put you off?
You should probably ask the Muslims. Really.
I will.
But my take on that. When I was a Muslim, I used to actually have a little bit of a a problem with evolution, but I used to try and explain it. I used to say, well, look, okay, so you've got these animals that were pre-human, but what made a human human is the soul.
Okay.
You know, the nafs.
Yeah.
And God put the soul of the humans into, you know, two of those creatures, of those creatures, and so Adam and Eve were the first humans, because God put the soul in them. And that was the way I used to deal with it. But I do find this idea. I mean, if you think about it, Homo sapiens have been here for 300,000 years, and if Adam and Eve were the first humans, really there is, you know, it's questionable to say that to say the least, that for 300,000 years, the first humans were bringing Islam, Adam and Eve, and their sons Habil wa Qabil, Cain and Abel, and the 124,000 prophets that came all brought this pure same message. There doesn't seem to be much evidence of that in the 300,000 years of Homo sapiens. So yeah, I find that a little bit questionable to say the least.
Indeed. I didn't know the Arabic for Cain and Abel. Habil and Qabil.
Habil wa Qabil.
Habil wa Qabil.
Yes.
Is there any meaning in that, or is it just a rendition of the
I
Hebrew?
think it's just the rendition of the whatever it was. I don't know whether it came from the Hebrew or the Aramaic or whatever. I don't know.
It's always a meaning. Hassan, Radwan, thank you very much.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome.